"Sir, with all due respect, but this automation proposal is completely outdated," said Hadley Tyler, crossing her legs and staring at the man across from her with a mixture of defiance and disbelief. "If you really want to revolutionize agribusiness, you need to stop thinking like you're still in the 1990s. The silence that followed could have cut through the air. In the conference room of Wheeler Enterprises in Dayton, Ohio, the other candidates for the agricultural control and automation engineer position seemed to have stopped breathing. Hadley, however, kept her gaze steady on the man who had presented the project, a guy in suits too expensive to be just another HR employee. Clayton Wheeler adjusted his navy blue tie and smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes but carried something Hadley couldn't decipher. Amusement, irritation, or perhaps admiration. "Continue," he said, leaning back in the leather chair. "I'm curious to know how a fresh graduate of 26 years old intends to revolutionize a sector that moves billions in this country." Hadley felt her blood heat up, but not from the provocation. There was something in that man's voice that made her want to prove every word she had said, and she would prove it, even if it cost her the job of her dreams. "Look," she began, opening the folder she had brought and spreading graphs across the table. "You're proposing basic moisture sensors when systems already exist that can monitor even plant respiration. You want to install drones that do simple mapping when you could have artificial intelligence algorithms predicting pest outbreaks 3 weeks in advance." Clayton leaned forward, interested despite himself. In the past 2 years, he had interviewed dozens of candidates. All arrived with impeccable resumes, but spoke like walking technical manuals. This young woman spoke as if the future of agriculture were a personal battle. "And do you think we have the budget for all this technological revolution?" he asked, testing her. "It's not about having or not having money," Hadley replied, her green eyes shining with passion. "It's about not being able to afford to fall behind. American agribusiness is competing globally, and if you keep thinking small, you'll be swallowed by companies that think big." It was at that moment that Victoria Collins, the HR director, decided to intervene. Elegant in her black Armani suit, she observed the scene with growing discomfort. "Miss Tyler," she said, her voice cutting like a blade, "I believe you haven't properly introduced yourself to our CEO." Hadley's world stopped. CEO? She looked again at the man in front of her, now noticing details she had ignored. The Patek Philippe watch, the ease with which he commanded the room, the way all the other employees looked at him with a mixture of respect and fear. "CEO?" she repeated, feeling heat rise up her cheeks. Clayton couldn't contain his laughter, a genuine laugh that completely transformed his severe expression. "Clayton Wheeler," he introduced himself, extending his hand. "And you, Hadley Tyler from Springfield, just gave me the first interesting interview in 2 years. His hand was firm and warm. Hadley shook it, trying to process the fact that she had just publicly challenged one of the most powerful men in Ohio agribusiness, a man who, according to business magazines, had built an empire, starting from a small farm, and now controlled thousands of acres of plantations. I didn't know," she stammered, losing her composure for the first time. "Better that way," said Clayton, still smiling. "Honesty is a rare quality around here." But Hadley was already regaining her composure. If there was one thing she had learned growing up in Springfield, a city famous for its stubborn farmers, it was that backing down never solved anything. "So," she asked, raising her chin, "are you going to fire me before even hiring me, or are you going to give me a chance to prove him right?" Clayton exchanged a look with Victoria, who seemed to be swallowing a sour lemon. Then he turned his attention back to Hadley. "You're hired," he said simply, "but with one condition. You'll have to prove every word you said here today, and I'll be watching very closely." The room exploded in muffled murmurs. Hadley felt her legs wobble, but kept her expression controlled. "Perfect," she replied. "I hope you're prepared to be surprised." As she left the room, followed by curious glances from the other candidates still awaiting their chances, Clayton remained looking through the window, that overlooked the golden soybean fields stretching to the horizon. For the first time in a long while, he had the feeling that something interesting was about to happen in his rigidly organized life. And he had no idea that at that moment, 200 miles away in Columbus, a young woman with features identical to Hadley's was tenderly kissing a dark-haired man who carried the same last name as him. 3 weeks later, Hadley was still getting used to the grandeur of Wheeler Enterprises. The corporate complex occupied an area the size of a small neighborhood, with state-of-the-art laboratories, silos that looked like horizontal skyscrapers, and offices that resembled space command centers. "Hadley, you need to see this," said Brandon Martinez, one of the engineering interns, running to her desk in the development sector. At 22, Brandon had the energy of a Labrador puppy and the technological enthusiasm of a teenager who had just gotten his first video game. "What is it now, Brandon?" she asked, not looking up from the programming codes occupying her 3 computer screens. "Tesla is chasing the chickens again," announced Felicity Lopez, the other intern, appearing behind Brandon with a mischievous smile. At 20, Felicity had the mischief of someone who grew up in the countryside and the sharp humor of someone who wasn't intimidated by anything. Hadley sighed and finally looked at both of them. The Tesla in question wasn't an electric car, but Clayton's border collie, who had a habit of showing up at the office and causing the biggest commotion. Apparently, someone had left the biotechnology lab door open, and the dog had discovered the chickens used for testing feed with modified grains. "And I need to know this because the boss is trying to capture Tesla with the help of the cleaning staff, and the scene is priceless," Brandon explained, holding back laughter. "Besides," added Felicity, "Victoria is having a fit because apparently she has a phobia of chickens, and now there are 5 of them loose on the executive floor." Hadley couldn't help but smile. Since arriving at Wheeler Enterprises, she had noticed that the company, despite all its sophistication, had an almost familial side. The employees treated each other with an informality she hadn't expected to find in a corporation of that size. "Don't you two have anything better to do?" she asked, trying to seem stern. "Actually, we do," said Brandon, suddenly becoming serious. "The efficiency reports from the pilot farms where you implemented the new sensors have arrived." Hadley straightened in her chair. This was the project that could define her future at the company. In the past 3 weeks, she had worked 12 hours a day to prove that her ideas weren't just academic theory. "And so, the numbers are—" Brandon made a dramatic pause. "Absurd. Absurd how?" Hadley felt her stomach contract. "Absurd good," Felicity quickly clarified. 23% reduction in pesticide use, 18% increase in productivity, and water savings reaching 30%. Hadley felt her legs weaken. She had hoped for positive results, but not this impressive. "Are you sure about these numbers?" "Triple-checked," Brandon confirmed. Marcus Taylor was beaming when he saw the results. He said that in 30 years of agricultural engineering, he'd never seen anything like it. Marcus Taylor was Wheeler Enterprises' veteran engineer, a living legend of Ohio agribusiness. If he was impressed, then— "Hadley," Victoria Collins' voice cut through the air like an icy blade. The HR director approached the desk, impeccable in her pearl grey suit, despite the recent episode with the chickens. "Mr. Wheeler wants to speak with you, now." The tone admitted no questions. Hadley looked at Brandon and Felicity, who made good luck faces, and followed Victoria through the marble corridors leading to the executive floor. "You may enter," said Victoria, knocking on the solid oak door of Clayton's office. The environment was exactly as Hadley had imagined. Elegant without being ostentatious, with works by local artists on the walls and a privileged view of the company's fields. Clayton stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back, contemplating the sunset that painted the sky in golden tones. "Sit down," he said without turning around. Hadley obeyed, noticing there was a folder on the desk, probably the reports Brandon and Felicity had mentioned. "Do you know why I called you here?" asked Clayton, finally turning around. "I imagine it's about the pilot test results." Exactly. He walked to the desk and opened the folder. Are these numbers real? They are. How? Hadley took a deep breath. It was now or never. Because I didn't limit myself to just installing equipment. I studied each farm, each type of soil, each microclimate. I created customized algorithms for each property. It wasn't just technology, it was applied science with surgical precision. Clayton observed her for a long moment. Hadley kept her gaze steady, even feeling butterflies doing acrobatics in her stomach. Do you have any idea what these results mean? That you'll save millions in operational costs and significantly increase profit margins? No, he said, sitting in the chair across from her. It means you're going to help me revolutionize American agribusiness. Hadley's heart did a somersault. She had dreamed of words like these since graduating, but hearing them from Clayton Wheeler was almost surreal. There's a meeting next Friday, he continued. International investors, government representatives, directors from other companies in the sector, you're going to present your project. Me? But there are no buts. You created it. You present it. Clayton smiled, and again Hadley felt that strange warmth she couldn't explain. I hope you have appropriate clothes for the occasion. Hadley looked at her simple blouse and jeans. It wasn't exactly the dress code of the high-level corporate world. I'll figure it out. Great. Oh, and Hadley, he called her when she was already getting up. Congratulations, you proved you were right. Leaving the office, Hadley could barely believe what had happened, but her euphoria was interrupted when she bumped into Catherine Santos, one of the HR employees, in the corridors. Sorry, Hadley said automatically. Hadley, good to see you, Catherine whispered, looking around nervously. I need to talk to you. In private. About what? About what they've been saying around the corridors. Catherine lowered her voice even more. About you and the boss. Hadley felt her blood freeze. What do you mean? Some people are saying you only got these results because, well, you understand. Catherine seemed uncomfortable. And there's more. I heard Victoria talking on the phone with someone about a presentation on Friday. She didn't seem happy at all. Before Hadley could respond, a male voice echoed through the corridor. Hadley, are you there? It was Clayton. Catherine quickly moved away, leaving Hadley alone with the feeling that her life had just become much more complicated. The call came on a Saturday morning, while Hadley was trying to decide what to wear for next Friday's presentation. Her Aunt Margaret had insisted on accompanying her shopping at the mall in Cincinnati, but even with the help of the former teacher who had refined taste despite her modest retirement, Hadley couldn't concentrate. Rachel? She answered the phone, surprised. Her twin sister rarely called on Saturdays, preferring to use her free time to study or go out with college friends. I need to tell you something. Rachel's voice sounded strange, a mixture of nervousness and euphoria. It's important. Did something happen? Are Mom and Dad okay? Everyone's fine. It's just that I'm dating someone. Hadley frowned. Rachel always talked about her relationships, so why all this ceremony now? That's good, isn't it? Who's the lucky guy? His name is Adrian. Adrian Wheeler. Hadley's blood froze. Wheeler. It couldn't be a coincidence. Wheeler as in Wheeler Enterprises, that's right, Rachel confirmed, her voice gaining excitement. But it's not what you're thinking. Adrian has nothing to do with the family business. He's a visual artist, makes incredible sculptures with recycled materials. I met him at an exhibition in Columbus. Hadley sat heavily on the bed, making Gears, her black cat, jump to the floor with an indignant meow. Rachel, do you know who owns Wheeler Enterprises? Of course, his older brother, Clayton. Why the question? Because I work there, and Clayton is my boss. The silence that followed was so long that Hadley actually checked if the call hadn't dropped. Rachel? You're kidding me? I'm not. And there's more. Apparently no one in the family knows where Adrian is or what he does for a living. What do you mean? Hadley took a deep breath and told her sister everything she had discovered in recent weeks. How Clayton rarely talked about family, but when he did, he mentioned a younger brother who had disappeared years ago. How the only information circulating in the company was that Adrian had fought with his father and left home to follow an alternative path. "My God," Rachel whispered. "Adrian never told me this. He only said the family didn't support his artistic choices. And you never told him about me. I told him I had a twin sister who worked with agricultural technology, but never mentioned the company. This is crazy. What are we going to do?" Before Hadley could answer, her Aunt Margaret appeared at the bedroom door, holding a navy blue dress. "Dear, I found the perfect piece for your presentation. Elegant, but not over the top." She stopped seeing Hadley's expression. "Did something happen?" "Aunt, do you believe in coincidences?" "Depends on the coincidence," the woman replied wisely. "Why the question?" Hadley put the phone on speaker and summarized the situation for both of them. When she finished, Rachel had fallen silent again, and Aunt Margaret was shaking her head with an expression Hadley knew well. It was the same one she made when grading papers and found a particularly creative answer. "Well," said the former teacher finally, "it seems you two have gotten yourselves into a situation that's part Mexican soap opera, part romantic comedy." "That doesn't help, Aunt," Hadley complained. "Actually, it does," Rachel replied over the phone. "Because it means we're not the only ones living a crazy story. What do you feel for your boss?" "I don't feel anything," Hadley responded too quickly. "Blatant lie," said Aunt Margaret, crossing her arms. "I've seen how you talked about him these past weeks, and don't give me that story about it being just professional admiration." Hadley sighed. It was impossible to hide anything from two women who had known her forever. "Okay, maybe I feel something. But it's complicated. Hez my boss, he's a billionaire, and I'm an interior engineer who until 3 weeks ago lived in an apartment that would fit in his living room." "So what?" asked Rachel. "Adrian told me that Clayton has always been obsessed with merit, not status. If he hired you and gave you this opportunity, it's because he recognizes your worth. It's not that simple, Rachel. There are people at the company insinuating that I only got this position because, well, you understand. Because you're beautiful and intelligent?" asked Aunt Margaret with irony. "How horrible." "Aunt? What?" "It's true. You and your sister are the two greatest treasures of Springfield since you were born, and any man who can't see beyond your beauty to recognize intelligence doesn't deserve even 5 minutes of your time. The problem is, I don't know if Clayton sees me as a professional or as something else," Hadley confessed. "Then find out," said Rachel. "And meanwhile, I'm going to talk to Adrian about this whole story. Maybe it's time for the Wheeler brothers to have a conversation after all these years." After Rachel hung up, Hadley sat looking at the dress her aunt had chosen. Navy blue, elegant, professional. It was perfect for the presentation. "Aunt, can I ask you a question?" "Always." "Do you think I'm doing the right thing? Accepting this presentation, trying to prove I deserve to be there?" Aunt Margaret sat beside her on the bed and took her hand. "Dear, your parents worked their whole lives on land that wasn't even theirs, dreaming of giving a better opportunity to you and your sister. You graduated with the best grades in your class, created technologies that can revolutionize American agriculture, and achieved all this being honest and hard-working." She squeezed Hadley's hand. "The question isn't whether you deserve to be there. The question is whether they deserve to have you." That night, Hadley called her parents in Springfield. John Tyler answered with the tired voice of someone who had spent the day in the field, but who immediately perked up upon hearing his daughter. "Dad, how do you know when you're doing the right thing?" "Ah, my daughter." The farmer's voice carried decades of experience. "Sometimes we don't know. We plant the seed, take care of it with love, and hope it grows. But one thing I learned in these 40 years working with land, good seed always grows, no matter how many obstacles it finds along the way. And if people doubt us, then you work twice as hard to prove they're wrong." John paused. "Your mother wants to talk to you." "Daughter?" The welcoming voice of Ann Tyler came through the phone. "Your father told me about Friday's presentation. We want you to know we're very proud. And no matter what happens, you'll always have a place here at home." After the call, Hadley felt more secure. On Friday, she would prove she deserved to be there, and if there was something between her and Clayton beyond the professional relationship, well, maybe it was time to find out. What she didn't know was that, at that moment, 300 miles away, Robert Lawson was ending a call that could completely change her plans. "Perfect," he said into the phone. "On Friday during the presentation will be the ideal moment. Make sure everything is ready." On the other side of the line, a female voice confirmed, "You can count on it, Robert. The little engineer doesn't know what's waiting for her." Friday dawned with a typical Ohio autumn storm. Hadley woke to the sound of rain hitting her apartment window and had the feeling that the day would be as stormy as the weather. Gears, the cat, was curled up at her feet, purring softly, oblivious to the nerves dominating her owner. "Good morning, little one," she whispered to the cat, petting her black head. Today is the big day. At 7 in the morning, her phone rang. It was Brandon. "Hadley, you need to come here now." "What happened?" she asked, already feeling her stomach contract. "The automation system servers are down, all of them, and the presentation is at 10. Hadley's blood froze. Her entire presentation depended on data collected by the system she had implemented. Without them, she would have no way to demonstrate the results. "I'm coming," she said, already jumping out of bed. At Wheeler Enterprises, the situation was controlled chaos. Brandon and Felicity were in the computer lab, surrounded by screens showing error codes. Marcus Taylor paced back and forth, talking on his cell phone with technicians from the hosting company. "What's the diagnosis?" asked Hadley, still changing in the company bathroom. "It looks like it was a coordinated attack," Felicity explained, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "Someone overloaded the servers with false requests exactly at 6 in the morning. An attack? Who would do such a thing?" Brandon and Felicity exchanged a meaningful look. "What aren't you telling me?" Hadley crossed her arms. "Last night Catherine approached me," Brandon said hesitantly. "She was nervous, said she heard a conversation between Victoria and someone about neutralizing today's presentation." "And you didn't think it was important to tell me this before?" "We thought it was just another HR gossip," Felicity admitted. "But now we have a sabotage system 2 hours before the most important presentation of my career," Hadley completed, feeling anger grow in her chest. The lab door opened, and Clayton entered, impeccable in his charcoal gray suit despite the storm outside. His face was serious, and Hadley realized he already knew everything. "How long do you need to restore the system?" he asked directly. "At least 4 hours," Marcus replied, "and that's if we can figure out exactly what was damaged. The meeting can't be postponed. We have investors who traveled from abroad specifically for this presentation." Hadley felt the ground crumble beneath her feet. All her work, all her expectations were going down the drain because of sabotage. "I can present the results using the data I have on my personal computer," she said, trying to sound confident. "It won't be as interactive as planned, but—" "That won't be enough," interrupted a cutting voice behind Clayton. Victoria Collins appeared at the door, impeccable as always, but with a triumphant gleam in her eyes that made Hadley suspect her even more. "The investors expected a live demonstration of the system," the HR director continued. "Static slides won't convince them to invest millions in the project." "So what do you suggest?" asked Clayton, his voice dangerously low. "That we postpone the presentation until we're sure everything will work perfectly," Victoria replied smoothly. "We can't afford to look amateur in front of international investors." It was at that moment that Hadley made a decision that would change everything. "No," she said firmly. "The presentation happens today, at the scheduled time." Everyone looked at her as if she had gone crazy. "Hadley," Clayton began, "without the system—" "I don't need the system to prove my project works," she interrupted him, feeling a fierce determination take over. "I need a phone, a drone, and access to the pilot farms." "What do you mean?" asked Marcus. "We're going to do the demonstration live," Hadley explained, her eyes shining with a crazy idea that was beginning to take shape. "In real time, directly from the field. If they want to see the system working, they'll see it from the source." "That's impossible," Victoria said quickly. "Too risky." Why? Hadley turned to her. Unless you're certain something will go wrong. The silence that followed was charged with tension. Victoria paled slightly, but quickly regained her composure. I'm just thinking about the company's reputation, she said. Then it's decided, Clayton announced. Hadley, you have an hour and a half to organize this live demonstration. Brandon, Felicity, you're going to help her. Marcus, prepare the transmission equipment. Victoria, he made a significant pause. Make sure nothing else goes wrong. While everyone ran to prepare the most insane presentation of their lives, Hadley felt a hand touch her shoulder. It was Clayton. Are you sure about what you're doing? He asked quietly. No, she admitted. But if someone is trying to sabotage me, I'm not going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me give up. Clayton smiled, and for the first time since she had known him, it was a completely genuine smile, without reservations. That's why you're special, he said. Most people would have used this as an excuse to run away. I'm not most people. No, you definitely aren't. An hour later, in Wheeler Enterprises' main conference room, 15 international investors, 3 directors from competing companies, and 2 representatives from the Department of Agriculture awaited the start of the presentation. Robert Lawson was among the guests, a satisfied smile on his face, clearly expecting to see Hadley fail publicly. Gentlemen, Clayton began, today you'll have the unique opportunity to follow a live demonstration of agricultural automation technology. Our engineer, Hadley Tyler, will connect you directly with our pilot farms. Hadley took a deep breath and activated the transmission system. On the giant screen appeared the image of a farm 100 miles from Dayton, where the drone controlled remotely by Brandon flew over the soybean fields. As you can see, she said, her voice firm despite her nerves, we're connected in real time with our property in Springfield. What you're seeing isn't pre-recorded data or simulations. It's our technology working right now at this moment. With Brandon and Felicity's help, who operated the equipment from the lab, Hadley guided the spectators through a fascinating journey across the fields. The moisture sensors responded in real time, showing colorful maps that indicated exactly where irrigation was needed. The AI algorithms identified possible pest outbreaks with surgical precision. The drones automatically adjusted fertilizer application according to each area's specific needs. Incredible, murmured one of the German investors. The precision is millimetric. And the costs? Asked a Japanese executive. Average reduction of 23% in operational costs, with an 18% increase in productivity, Hadley replied without hesitation. But it was when she demonstrated the system's predictive capability that the room was truly impressed. Connecting to another farm, she showed how the system had predicted 3 weeks earlier a soybean caterpillar attack that was only now manifesting visually. How is this possible? Asked Robert, trying to disguise his irritation. Analysis of microscopic patterns in the leaves, combined with meteorological data and the region's pest history, Hadley explained. The system identifies threats before they're even visible to the human eye. For 45 minutes, Hadley conducted the most impressive presentation of her life. Each question was answered with live demonstrations. Each doubt was clarified with real data. When she finally turned off the transmissions, the room exploded in applause. Extraordinary, said the German investor. In 30 years of financing technological projects, I've never seen anything like this. We'd like to immediately discuss the terms of an investment, added the Japanese executive. Clayton approached Hadley with evident pride in his eyes. Congratulations, he said quietly. You just secured the biggest contract in Wheeler Enterprises history. But the celebration was interrupted when Brandon burst into the room, clearly agitated. Hadley, I need to talk to you urgent. Not now, Brandon. It's about the sabotage, he whispered. We found out who it was. Hadley's blood froze. She looked around the room, where investors were still talking animatedly about the project, and discreetly followed Brandon to the corridor. What did you discover? The attempts to access our servers came from Victoria's computer, said Felicity, appearing beside them. But there's more. Catherine managed to record a call between her and Robert Lawson. They planned everything. Hadley felt a mixture of anger and relief. Anger at the betrayal, relief at finally having proof. Where's the recording? Here, Catherine appeared, holding a USB drive. It's all here. Robert promised a director position at his company in exchange for sabotaging your presentation. And now? Asked Brandon. Hadley looked through the conference room door, where Clayton was talking with the investors. Victoria stood beside him, smiling as if nothing had happened. Robert observed everything with an expression that could no longer disguise his frustration. Now, said Hadley, they're going to find out they messed with the wrong person. 20 minutes later, Clayton gathered the entire company board in the conference room. The investors had already left, satisfied with the preliminary contracts they had signed. Robert had stayed, claiming interest in possible future partnerships. Before we finalize the contract details, said Clayton, I'd like to clarify a matter that came to my attention. He nodded to Brandon, who connected the USB drive to the room's sound system. This morning our systems were sabotaged, Clayton continued, his voice dangerously calm. Fortunately, we managed to identify those responsible. The recording began to play. Victoria's voice was unmistakable. Robert, the system will be down at 6 in the morning. The little engineer won't know what hit her. Robert's response was equally clear. Perfect. With her publicly demoralized, ill managed to convince some investors to switch sides. And you'll have your director position at my company. The silence in the room was deafening. Victoria was pale as paper, her hands visibly trembling. Robert had completely lost his composure. I can explain, Victoria began. There's nothing to explain, Clayton interrupted coldly. Catherine, please call security. These two people need to be escorted out of the building immediately. Clayton, you're making a mistake, said Robert, trying to regain control. That girl will destroy your company. She doesn't have the experience to handle investments of this magnitude. The only thing being destroyed here today is your reputation, Clayton replied. And regarding the girl's experience, she just closed the biggest agribusiness contract in Ohio history, using only her competence and integrity. While security escorted Victoria and Robert out, Clayton approached Hadley. I'm sorry for all this, he said. You didn't deserve to go through this situation. Actually, Hadley replied, I think it was exactly what I needed. Now I know what I'm capable of when under pressure. And I know I can trust you completely, he said, his eyes meeting hers. Hadley, I'd like to talk to you about work and other things. Before she could respond, her phone rang. It was Rachel. Had, you won't believe what happened. Her sister's voice was vibrating with emotion. Adrian just told me the truth about the fight with his family, and there's something you need to know about his and Clayton's past. Hadley looked at Clayton, who observed the call with curiosity. Rachel, now isn't a good time. Yes, it is, because this information changes everything. Adrian didn't fight with the family because of art. He discovered something about their father's business, something that could directly affect Wheeler Enterprises. Hadley's heart accelerated. After a day full of twists, it seemed the biggest one was yet to come. 2 hours later, Hadley found herself at her Aunt Margaret's apartment in Cincinnati, accompanied by Clayton and waiting for Rachel and Adrian to arrive. The atmosphere in the living room was tense, charged with expectation and nervousness. Aunt Margaret served coffee to everyone, while discreetly observing the interaction between her niece and the businessman. Are you sure you want to hear this here? Asked Hadley to Clayton. It might be something personal about your family. If it involves my family and my company, I need to know, he replied. But Hadley noticed the tension in his voice. Besides, after today, I think I can trust you with any information. The doorbell rang, and Aunt Margaret went to answer it. Hadley heard Rachel's voice, and that of a man she didn't know. When they entered the living room, she was shocked by the resemblance between the Wheeler brothers. Adrian had the same penetrating eyes as Clayton, the same striking facial structure, but his hair was longer, and he wore clothes that screamed bohemian artist. The brothers' meeting was both touching and awkward. Clayton slowly stood up, his eyes fixed on his brother's face, whom he hadn't seen in 5 years. "Adrian," he said simply. "Clayton," the younger one replied, equally moved. They hugged briefly, an embrace loaded with 5 years of longing, hurt, and wounded pride. "You look good," Clayton observed. "Thinner, but good. And you look older," Adrian replied with a half-smile. "The weight of responsibility, I imagine." Rachel approached Hadley, and the sisters hugged. It was impressive how, even being identical, they complemented each other in different ways. Rachel had a solar energy that contrasted with Hadley's more reserved determination. "So," said Aunt Margaret, always practical, "how about we sit and talk like civilized adults? I have the impression there are many misunderstandings to be clarified." Everyone settled in the cozy living room. Adrian kept Rachel's hand intertwined with his, while Clayton and Hadley sat on the sofa, a respectful distance between them, but clearly aware of each other's presence. "Clayton," Adrian began, "I didn't run away from home because I wanted to be an artist." "Then why did you run?" asked the older brother, his voice controlled but loaded with emotion. "Because I discovered that our father was involved with Robert Lawson in business that wasn't legal." The silence that followed was heavy. Clayton visibly paled. "What do you mean?" "6 years ago, I was organizing the office papers at home to help Dad with accounting. I found documents showing that Robert was paying for our company to provide fake organic origin certificates for conventional grains. The price for organics is 3 times higher in the international market." "That's impossible," said Clayton, but his voice didn't sound convincing. "Dad would never do such a thing." "I thought so too. I confronted him and he told me Robert was blackmailing him. Apparently, years ago, when the company was almost bankrupt, Dad accepted an unofficial loan from Robert, a loan that came with conditions he only discovered later." Hadley carefully observed Clayton. She could see the pain spreading across his face as the truth was revealed. "Why didn't you tell me?" asked Clayton. "We could have solved this together." "Because you were in college killing yourself studying, and Dad made me promise I wouldn't tell. He said he was going to find a way to get rid of Robert and clear the family name. And you believed him. For a while. Until I discovered he was lying. The business with Robert continued even after the company stabilized financially. That's when I exploded and left home." "My God," Clayton whispered. "That's why Robert was so confident today. He thought he still had some influence over us." "But he doesn't," Adrian said firmly. "Dad reached out to me. He was sorry and wanted to make peace. He gave me all the documents that prove Robert's blackmail, including recordings where Robert admits to forcing the situation." Adrian took a folder from the backpack he had brought. "It's all here. Enough to destroy Robert legally and clear our family's name." Clayton took the folder with trembling hands. For several minutes he examined the documents in silence, his expression shifting from shock to anger, and finally to relief. "Why didn't you approach me before?" he asked finally. "Because I was too proud to admit I was wrong about you," Adrian confessed. "I thought you knew about everything and were agreeing with the dirty business. I only discovered I was mistaken when Rachel told me about today's presentation, about how you defended Hadley against Robert and Victoria. And I thought you had abandoned me because you thought I wasn't good enough to lead the company," Clayton admitted. "I never thought that. I always knew you were better than me at business. I just couldn't stay in a company I thought was tainted." Rachel, who had observed the conversation in silence, finally spoke. "You know what's funny? You two spent 5 years suffering over misunderstandings that could have been resolved with one honest conversation. Like you two," added Aunt Margaret wisely, looking at Hadley and then at Clayton. "You're also dancing around obvious feelings instead of talking about them." Hadley felt her face heat up. "Aunt, what? It's true. Anyone with eyes can see you two are in love. And after everything that happened today, if you're not honest with each other, you're more stubborn than mules." Clayton turned to Hadley, his intense eyes fixed on hers. "She's right," he said simply. "About me being in love, at least." Hadley's heart raced. Clayton, let me finish, he asked. From the first day, when you walked into my office and challenged everything I believed about agricultural automation, you changed everything. Not just in the company, but in me. You reminded me why I started all this, what my original dreams were before I got lost in administration and numbers. You changed my life too, Hadley confessed, her voice low but firm. Not just by giving me an opportunity, but by showing that it's possible to be successful without losing integrity. And yes, I'm in love with you too. Finally, exclaimed Rachel, clapping her hands. I thought you'd never admit it. Rachel, Hadley scolded, but she was smiling. What? Adrian and I were already making bets about when you'd declare your feelings. You made bets about us? Asked Clayton, amused. He bet you'd declare yourself first, said Rachel, pointing to Adrian. I bet on Hadley. Technically it was a tie, so nobody pays anything. Everyone laughed, and for the first time in hours, the tension in the room completely diminished. So, said Adrian, what do we do now? With Robert? With the company? With everything? Now, Clayton replied, taking Hadley's hand, we clean up the mess our father left, expand the company with Hadley's technology, and build something our family can truly be proud of. And you too? Asked Aunt Margaret. Will you manage to separate personal and professional life? Clayton and Hadley looked at each other. Actually, said Hadley, I think our personal and professional lives have always been connected, since the first day. Besides, added Clayton, after today, I think we can face any challenge together. Rachel stood up and hugged her sister. I'm so happy for you, Had. You deserve all this. We deserve it, Hadley corrected. All of us. Two girls from Springfield who conquered the world without losing their roots. As the night progressed, the Wheeler brothers talked about the company's future, about how to definitively clean the family name, and about the international expansion plans that were now possible thanks to Hadley's technology. Rachel and Adrian talked about their plans to move to Dayton, where he could have a larger studio and she could work in Wheeler Enterprises' mechanical engineering sector. And Hadley and Clayton, finally free to express their feelings, began planning not just a professional future together, but a lifetime of partnership, challenges, and love. Epilogue. 6 months later. The launch ceremony for Wheeler Enterprises' international branch in Chicago was an event that marked an era in American agribusiness. Hadley, now Director of Technological Innovation at the company, had developed an automation system that was being adopted by farms in 5 different countries. Nervous? Asked Clayton, adjusting his tie while observing the crowd of journalists, investors, and authorities gathering in the hotel auditorium. A little, Hadley admitted, smoothing the blue dress that had become her lucky color. But it's a good nervousness. The kind I feel when I know I'm about to do something important. Like when you challenged an unknown CEO in a job interview? Exactly like that, she smiled, remembering that day that had completely changed her life. Rachel and Adrian approached. Rachel was radiant in her green dress, proudly displaying the engagement ring Adrian had given her the previous month. Adrian, in turn, had traded his disheveled clothes for an elegant suit, but maintained the artistically messy hair that was his trademark. "Did Mom and Dad arrive?" asked Hadley. "They just got here," Rachel replied. "Dad is impressed with the size of the hotel, and Mom can't stop telling everyone she meets that you two are her daughters." "And your parents?" Hadley asked Clayton. "They're in the front row, proud as peacocks," he replied, smiling. "Dad said he never imagined the small company would become all this." The Wheeler family reconciliation had been one of the most gratifying aspects of recent months. The lawsuit against Robert Lawson had resulted in his imprisonment for blackmail and fraud, finally clearing the family name. Clayton had used part of the recovered resources to create a foundation supporting small rural producers, something his father had always dreamed of doing. "Guys," called Brandon, appearing with his always energetic manner, "it's time. The press is waiting." Brandon and Felicity had been promoted to coordinators of the development sector and formed an inseparable duo at the company. Catherine had taken Victoria's place as HR director, proving to be much more efficient and honest than her predecessor. "Shall we?" asked Clayton, offering his arm to Hadley. As they walked to the stage, Hadley thought about the incredible journey that had brought her there. Just 1 year ago, she was a recent graduate engineer, living in a simple apartment in Springfield, dreaming of making a difference in agribusiness. Now she was about to present her technology to the entire world, alongside the man she loved and with the unconditional support of her family. "There's something I need to tell you before we go on stage," said Clayton, stopping for a moment. "What is it?" asked Hadley, noticing the seriousness in his voice. He smiled and pulled a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. "I know this isn't the most romantic moment with all these people waiting, but I couldn't wait any longer." Hadley's heart stopped. Around them, Rachel screamed with joy, Adrian began to applaud, and Brandon pulled Felicity to get a better view of the scene. "Hadley Tyler," said Clayton, opening the box to reveal a simple but stunning diamond ring. "Will you marry me? Not just as my business partner, but as my life companion." Tears began to flow down Hadley's face, but she was smiling more than she had ever smiled in her life. "Yes," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, I want to." Clayton slipped the ring on her finger and then kissed her, a kiss full of promises of future, love, and true partnership. When they separated, they were met with an explosion of applause. The audience in the auditorium, who had witnessed everything through screens showing the backstage, was on their feet, applauding not just the engagement, but the love story that had won everyone over. "Well," said Hadley, wiping away tears but maintaining her smile, "I think this is going to be the most memorable presentation of my career." "Our career," Clayton corrected. "From now on, everything is ours." And so, hand in hand, they went up on stage to present not just a new technology, but a new phase of their lives, a phase built on love, trust, mutual respect, and the certainty that together they could conquer anything. In the front row of the audience, John and Ann Tyler watched with tears of pride in their eyes at the daughters they had raised with so much love in Little Springfield. Beside them, Clayton and Adrian's parents smiled, knowing their family was finally complete again, and somewhere in the audience, Gears, Hadley's black cat, slept peacefully in Aunt Margaret's lap, unaware that her owner had just found her happiness forever. Because sometimes the best stories begin with an unexpected question, an accepted challenge, and the courage to be exactly who we are, even when, especially when, that leads us to places we never imagined possible.